Hey, welcome back everybody for our last session for the day. And it's going to be a beauty, I reckon, even with the name, Stories from the Hustings. We've heard from Rebecca and Susanna and Zali and Kathy last night and Helen this morning. It takes a fair bit of grit to do this business, and it can be rough out there on the hustings. So we're going to hear from 4 women who have been out there, put themselves out there, and they're going to share with us a sense of really what it's like and why they would bother doing it. What really is winning? Is getting elected the only win? Are there other wins? It's going to be a really interesting conversation with these 4 women. So let me introduce them to you. The first one, of course, you all know already, Senator Jacqui Lambie. She's the leader and founder of the Jacqui Lambie Network and is a Tasmanian senator. And she believes it's time to get things done with no excuses and no pussyfooting around. And we all know that about Jacqui and love it. So welcome to you, Jacqui. Then we've got Judy Ryan. So as a country woman who's living in an inner city suburb, Judy used the electoral system to determine and secure community support for a medically supervised injecting room. Then we have Jacqui Hawkins, who stood as an independent candidate for the Victorian Legislative Assembly seat of Benambra. Jacqui has worked as an electoral officer for a number of independent members of Parliament and is an advisor at the moment in the office of Susanna Sheed. And finally, Tammy Atkins. So Tammy is a former founding member of Voices for Indi and currently a managing director of It's On Purpose. She works with businesses and not-for-profits to apply business and financial skills to solve social, enterprise and community challenges. She has run as an independent candidate for the Victorian state seat of Murray Valley. So welcome to you all. Max, I will ask you to unmute Jacqui and find her for us. And Jacqui, we'll welcome you to share with us for a few minutes some thoughts and experience of what it's been like for you out there on the hustings.
Thanks, Alana. Hello, I'm Jacqui Hawkins and I'm from Wodonga in northeast Victoria. I grew up on a family farm about 20 minutes from town at a place called Staghorn Flat, which I don't think many people will know about. I'm 29 years of age and I'm the youngest of 3 sisters. I personally never thought nor considered that one day I'd ever put my hand up for office, and I think my family were very much of the same opinion. I was very focused on my sport, and it would have been anyone's guess that maybe I would have pursued something along that path or something outdoors. But fast forwarding, I've worked 4 years in a vet clinic. I've worked as a geotechnician based in Wodonga on a large construction project. I've also worked for administrative support for the Latrobe Head of Campus in Latrobe University, Wodonga. I've worked in manufacturing and research and development at Mars Pet Care. And as Alana mentioned previously, more recently, I've collectively spent 4 years working for 3 advisors in independent members' offices, both at a state and federal level. Firstly, the former member for Indi, Kathy McGowan, Susanna Sheed, the independent member for Shepparton, and Ali Cupper, the independent member for Mildura. I guess in terms of my campaign experience, just as an FYI, I've worked on the McGowan 2016 campaign. I've also run myself in the 2018 Victorian state election as an independent for the Legislative Assembly. I also gave some support during the recent federal election for the area of Mallee, and also out of state worked on Alexander Ocasio-Cortez's campaign in research. So a little bit about my community and why I stood. So in 2018, I was 27 and I put my hand up and ran for the seat of Benambra as an independent. And for those of you who don't know, Benambra stretches from the wine country of Rutherglen up to the high country of Corrion, and then down through the slopes of Falls Creek, then down to the border town of Wodonga. And I'm a 5th generation to this region, and the seat of Benambra had long been a Conservative held and mostly Liberal seat. But in 2013, after the Orange Wave, electorates such as Benambra, which fall within Indi, have been politically referred to as McGowan country. Before I ran for Benambra, the local member had been in for roughly 12 years and won pretty easy outright on first votes, getting well over the 50% mark. And our, same as Susanna Sheed, if you were in the previous panel session before, our community had really been off the radar for government for some time, and Benambra had just been a given Liberal seat. And because of that, complacency had well and truly sat in. And there was just overall a lack of vision and really a lack of community engagement in what that vision could look like for our community. And this is essentially what I ran on. And it showed in the results that I was not alone in my thinking, and my team that supported me, we were able to communicate that message really effectively to our electorate. It took actually 10 days of preference distributions, and it came down to just 1,000 votes between me and the incumbent, which saw him retain his seat, but now with a margin of only 2.4% and with a 7.4% swing towards the independent. Now, the question I was given was, why do you identify as a community-minded independent? And when it comes to this question, it's because I truly want to reflect what my community needs and be their representative and voice, and not be bound to the party structure and system that we currently have. For me, the people of the electorate are my party, and they're the people who I want to make sure are heard within the chambers of Parliament. When I was at La Trobe University, actually, where I'm actually right now, I was doing my undergraduate degree, and there was a community forum event, and there was a guest speaker. I'd never heard of her before, but I do now, and it was Cathy McGowan. And I went and sat in, and Cathy was speaking about how she sees her role as an elected member of Parliament. And to me, as a young woman, it was the first time I've ever heard a member of Parliament speak like that. Traditionally, political leaders have operated in a really vertical style of political leadership, top-down kind of approach, where the hierarchy of the political party kind of determines the political vision which is imposed on different electorates. But here was Cathy talking about this horizontal approach to political leadership, which was about engaging at a community level and involving the community in policy discussions and the problem solving, and to become, the creators of the policy vision and strategy that works for them. And this is why I ran, and this is essentially why I put my hand up, is because I want to do politics differently. But one of the things is, with running as an independent, there is both challenges and benefits. One of the biggest challenges is building your team. As an independent, you don't have the pre-existing infrastructure of the party system. You don't have the resources, the funds, but also the accumulative knowledge that you gather over a campaign life cycle. You're essentially starting from scratch, and a good analogy I think really encapsulates it is you're building the car while you're driving it. I strongly emphasise, to try and address this challenge is the planning and preparation and getting in early and doing that groundwork. I can definitely empathise to know that it's really hard to know where to start because there's so many different moving parts to a campaign. But what helped me was simply just getting some butcher's paper, whacking it up on the wall in my room, and over a period of time, I would slowly write down all the tasks and the roles that needed to occur within the campaign. As soon as one of the ideas popped up, I'd write it down. And I also did a timeline of important campaign dates and started to identify people who may be able to take on those tasks, particularly leadership roles. And you may have heard in all these different sessions today how you need different people to run the polling booths, to do the fundraising, whatever it may be, you need leaders. A resource that helped me in this process is the Victorian Local Government Association document, which is called Your Campaign Toolkit. And regardless of what level you're running at and where you're running at, this toolkit can be easily repurposed and be upscaled for essentially whatever you need. So I advise having to have a look at it and see if it may be able to just to start your thinking and just launch you off. But during my campaign, I had over 100 volunteers, and in speaking with a good friend in preparation for today, who was also a volunteer in my campaign, he recalled the time that when we had 9 campaign volunteers at the pre-polling booth, and we were outstaffing all the major parties, and we were able to walk up and down the streets and actually have meaningful conversations with those people at the same time. We also spoke about the campaign was a success in running down this margin because we had an incredible team with skills and they were able to give their time. But importantly, it comes down to that they believed in the vision that we had set. A benefit, though, of being independent and saying, the challenge is coming up with the team is that essentially that you are the architect and the engineer of your campaign and you can make it whatever you like it to be. And one of the things that was most helpful for me in determining what my campaign team and experience was going to be was identifying my values and also the team coming up with values and behaviours that were associated to that. And I think you would have heard a lot about that today, but I remember my campaign manager, who you may know really well now, Jill Briggs, the fabulous Jill Briggs, who handed me a bundle of words. And these words had all these different various values, and I laid them across my room for many weeks and slowly removed the least important values to me till I only had a handful that were left. And doing this exercise, I was able to establish what my key values were. And then I was able to replicate this similar activity with my team and be able to establish team values that we all understood and knew of. But essentially by doing this, I was able to be very clear on my core values. When I was confronted with a challenging situation or a decision, I would reflect and I would lean onto my values. And by doing so, I was in control of what I did out there on the campaign trail. So that helped me. And at every campaign team meeting, they were stuck up on the wall. They were mentioned in our team meeting just so that people were reminded, but also that we were accountable to ourselves on every moment of that campaign. My other challenge that I face as an independent, and also throughout my working life with independent members, has been working across media and communications. For me, this is quite a minefield. I didn't have experience in media and comms. And though I've spoken and presented at large groups and forums, I've never been, presented and stood in front of a media pack and had to have them at my arm's length and asking, very tasking questions at times. And so I needed to practice and I needed to get confident in that space. It was actually, only a handful of people know this, but a few days before I announced my candidacy, I invited my two nephews over and said to them, okay, I'm going to talk and I want you to go crazy, make as much noise as you can and see if you can distract me. And this was pretty easy for two boys, I can tell you. But for me, this exercise was about putting myself amongst the elements to ensure that no matter what was happening around me or what was being asked, that I would remain present and I'd deliver the message that I went there to deliver. Media can definitely be unpredictable. I remember during my campaign, I did an hour-long interview with a journalist of a national paper to then later on that afternoon to call me and say, sorry, but we accidentally deleted the interview. And I had to, off the cuff, speak to what I'd already spoke before. And as a first-time candidate, after you get yourself calm and collected, had to put myself back into that space. Another time I had to deal with and manage a misconstrued heading that went to print, and to be able to manage my emotions, but also, get the team around me to support me in a time where, I felt a little bit vulnerable, to be honest. But I guess the other thing to consider around media is social media. It's an important aspect of a campaign, more so now given COVID. And it was my main communication tool from me to my community. And though a lot of good can come from it, it also can be the birthplace of a lot of toxicity. And it certainly doesn't serve your best interest to scroll through your social media and to read the comments. And I suggest that a learning from this has been to find someone else who can do that for you and can really pass along to you the need to know kind of stuff, the things that you really need to understand or that may be important to you right now. But I guess in this third point that I'm making is that my message in media is how important it is to build and foster relationships with the media, but it's also important to understand the political overlay that may be present within your community. Keep on top of the news by reading your papers, your articles, but this doesn't have to be all you. You can outsource it and you can get your team around you so that you can focus on delivering your message.
I think a clap for that. We're clapping here in the room, Jacqui. I can encapsulate the feedback we're getting with 2 words that say, wow, impressive. And it also reminds me to go back to Helen Haynes's keynote speech this morning when she talked about hope, not fear, and seeing you, a young woman with the courage that you have. I think we can all be very hopeful for the future that you are our next lot of parliamentarians, and won't that be great? So thank you for that, and we'll come back to you. So let's follow up Jacqui Hawkins with another impressive Jacqui. So Jacqui Lambie, are you there somewhere? Max, can we find her? No, not happening yet. She might not be. Okay, Max, while you're doing that, let's move to Judy Ryan, because I know Judy is in the system. And if you could unmute her, that would be great. Oh, everyone, Jacqui is there. All right, Judy. We'll have Judy and then we'll come back to Jacqui Lambie when we can. Hello, Judy, and welcome to us.
Hello, and thank you for having me, Alana. I'd just like to share a screen here.
Here we go. Well done.
There we go. Great. Look, thank you all. And I'm speaking today to you from the land of the Wurundjeri people. And I pay respects to them, their elders. And it's wonderful to be here. And I'm very knowledgeable of the fact that there are 7... Sorry, just excuse me for a minute. Is that working?
I think so.
Okay. Are we there?
Not quite. Here we go. Well done, Judy.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm also really knowledgeable, acknowledging the fact that there are people from 78 electorates across Australia in this convention this weekend. So I just think that's an extraordinary feat. And I'm also mindful of the topic that I'm speaking about today, which is about the issue of mental health and substance addiction. Not only relates to inner city living, but also applies pretty much across the whole country. So whilst I'm talking from an inner city setting, I think a lot of people will identify what I'm talking about. So a little bit about myself too. I'm originally from Northeast Victoria, an Indi woman, it might be said, and I moved to Melbourne in 2012 to help care for my elderly mother-in-law, and moved into an inner city part of Victoria that had a notorious drug injecting issue, a lot of overdoses and deaths over a couple of decades. So there had been a drug market for years, and there are images there of what was happening in my rear laneway for years, ambulances, 000 calls, sirens, people overdosed between cars in carports. It was just a war zone, and really only people who could live in this for as long as many of my neighbours had done would understand the trauma of it from a humanitarian perspective. So I suppose for 4 years I thought about this and dealt with it as everybody does. But in mid-2016, I had an experience with a young man overdosed in my laneway. And I always saw these people as somebody's beloved, you know, a partner, a sibling, a grandchild, you know, a son or a daughter. They were never nobody. And so this particular day, I was very upset, and I said to my partner, John, they should do something about this. And as the weeks went by, it became very clear that they was me. And the reason it was me was because I had passion about this issue. For the 4 years, you know, I'd had these people coming across people slumped in laneways and gutters. And literally 2 kilometres from the Parliament House of Victoria, we had people dying in our streets. It wasn't a third world country, it was Melbourne. So I really thought, what am I going to do about this? And I'd only been here for 4 years, and it's quite a different scenario, creating a tribe or your community in a country setting versus a city setting. So I then thought, well, what will I do about this? So I decided to learn about this issue. I mean, I've run my own business. I'm a relocation consultant. I'd done that work in country Victoria. And here I was confronting injecting drug use and mental health issues. So I did a lot of homework. I looked at Google everything. I looked at supervised injecting facilities across the world. And there was one up the Hume Highway in Sydney, the amazing medically supervised injecting centre in King's Cross that opened in 2001. So I took myself up to that centre, and I met the amazing staff there. It was a remarkable health centre, professionally run, very much focused on caring for people, harm reduction, saving lives, but not only keeping people alive, but rehabilitating them. It took my breath away, and I thought, I want one of these in my community. But how was I going to do that? I didn't know many people, and I thought I need to do some market research to see if other people thought about this the way I did. Did they care about it? Did they see a way forward for this community? So I wanted to do some urgent and unequivocal market research. But to do that, you need a lot of money. You need to employ people. You need that. It takes time. It's scientific. And I thought, well, what can I do about that? And this was getting to about September 2016, and I became aware that there were local council elections in Victoria about 5 weeks later. And it was a bingo moment. I thought, politicians always say there's only one poll that counts. And I thought, well, I'm going to make this one count, not just for me, but hopefully for our community. So I ran as an independent candidate on a single issue of a medically supervised injecting room trial in our area. And whilst so many people told me you can't run on a single issue, I thought, as an independent, I can do what I like. So I paid my $250 to the returning officer, and coming home on the tram, I shook with horror at what I'd done. There was no backing out. I thought, who do I think I am that I will do something about one of the most controversial issues in Australia? Anyway, you never die wondering, as my mother would say. So I went home and I got cracking. And so I had the plan and I had to make it happen. So I went to the election and I got the support of my neighbour Lorraine and my partner John. I had about $1,500 and we door knocked, we spoke to people, and on the day of the election, I accumulated nearly 600 primary votes. Now, that mightn't sound much to you, but I thought I'd get about 30. And so it was a remarkable outcome. And not only that, I was contacted the next day by the mayor at the time of the city of Yarra, who told me that I nearly got in. The preferences were great. And, you know, I'm so glad I didn't, because I really respect the role that councillors play in our localities, but I would not have had the time to commit to my campaign had I been talking about waste and roads and bicycle paths and all those things that matter at that level. So my partner, John, said I actually got the best of both worlds. I didn't get onto council, but I got a mandate to do something about this issue. So what we all need next in any campaign is people, the people. And I had my tribe, the most extraordinary human beings who I'd never met before, came out of the woodwork at that election. They said, no matter what happens, Judy, we will work with you on this issue. It should have been dealt with years ago. So I just want to talk about this for a moment. We've been from Kathy last night to Helen this morning and many others that we've heard. People is what it's all about. And people with values, you know, the same lived experience, similar lived experience, passion, respect, evidence-based, principles of listening to other people, respecting different views. It was the most remarkable experience of my life. So you'll see up on the left there, this was the sort of core group of people that came together initially to look at our strategy. And every month we would have our kitchen table conversations, which took place in a warehouse in North Richmond. And we used resources that were provided to us by the magnificent people at the Sydney Supervising Injecting Centre, because we didn't have any money. And they loaned us a film, a 14-minute film, an in-house film that they'd done explaining the extraordinary operational work of their facility. And it was just extraordinary. The transformation of the people who'd lived in that community were able to talk about their experiences. They were able to share their frustrations and the horror of people slumped in their garages and gardens with other people who they didn't know. And it was just an extraordinary coming together, a sense of belonging, a sense of optimism, and an incredible sense of energy. And they wanted this to happen. And at the end of the film from the Sydney Injecting Room, every time Dr. Marianne Jauncey from that centre would pose the question to the camera, tell me, where would the next injecting room be in Australia? And those kitchen table meetings would just erupt with people saying, it's going to be here. It was amazing. So it was breathtaking how extraordinary it was. So we got together and we decided to do some great work, door knocking. We did a lot of friend raising, so we didn't have any money, but we did friend raising activities, sausage sizzles and movie nights and all of that sort of thing. But the focus was always on education. We would get experts in, from people from Ambulance Victoria, from the drug court, from police, from the media, would come and speak to our groups, and they would donate things in kind for raffles and money and that sort of thing. But the focus was this rally that we did, and it was an amazing experience to coincide with International Overdose Awareness Day at the end of August in 2017. And we decided not to accept any funding from any political party. We were offered money from a political party, one of the well-known parties, as long as we had their branding all over it. Well, we decided that that was highly inappropriate and we wouldn't become hostage to any political party. But also our focus was not on politics as such. It was more on providing a destigmatised look at the families of people that had suffered overdose deaths in their families. We figured the politicians get a lot of opportunities to speak. These people do not. So when we organised the campaign at the rally, marching the streets in Victoria Street and then up towards the main area where people overdosed, I was contacted by all the senior federal politicians who wanted to speak, and I politely declined. their interest. I said, no, this isn't your day. It's for people that want to tell people what it's like to have the lived experience of addiction and fatal overdoses. And it was a horrible, typical cold winter horizontal sleet Melbourne day, and we had over 700 people come out to talk about people overdosing and dying in our streets. An extraordinary sight. You'll see there we got a lot of media. We had people carrying placards that we made just from laminated bits of paper. It was an amazing event. And I will just add here that our local member who had been in Parliament for 17 years, in his maiden speech, he'd actually said that injecting drug use was one of the biggest issues facing the Richmond area in 1999. All my efforts to speak with that member up until that time had fallen on deaf ears. So he knew that this is what I was trying to do, and yet I couldn't get a hearing, a meeting. So that was problematic. But you move on, you get on with the job. So eventually, you'll see in the top right corner there, Premier Daniel Andrews changed his mind on the whole issue of an injecting room, which he'd opposed since coming to power in 2014. We weren't the only reason that he changed his mind. There had been coronial inquiries during the year and recommendations for a supervised injecting room. There had been a huge amount of work done by research bodies leading up to our activism. Reason Party MP Fiona Patton had put up a private members bill wanting a trial of a medically supervised injecting room. But I really believe that the activism of the public saying to politicians, there are votes in this, people care about this, it can't be deterred. We have to deal with this in our community. So Premier Andrews announced at the end of October 2017 that there would be a trial, and it started the following year in June 2018. And the photo to the left is a photo of people on a freezing cold day, another one in Melbourne, of people, and that's the injecting room there just behind us. It's a health centre. It's an incredibly effective, professional, harm reduction focused health centre. We need more of them in Victoria and, dare I say, across the country. We need to look at this issue as a health issue, not a criminal issue. So no life has been lost in the supervised injecting room, and a lot of lives and families have been saved. Thank you.
Judy, thank you so much. You wouldn't believe the number of messages that are coming in saying how inspiring it is to listen to your story, and to thank you for sharing that with us. And I think one of the most telling comments that came in is that your story is a demonstration that winning office isn't the only way to win. So fantastic story. Thank you. Now let's go and find Jacqui Lambie. Max, can you find Jacqui for us?
Hello.
There she is.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. We're having a terrific conversation here about the hustings, and we know that you know a hell of a lot about out there in the hustings, Jacqui. So we're looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Certainly, and thank you very much for having me on. Look, I was given some prompts for this speech, and they were things like why it's good to be an independent, why I'm proud to be an independent, what it means to represent your own community as an independent. But I figured that I'm probably not the best person to answer those questions. Instead, I want to give the sort of speech I wish somebody had bothered to give me when I first started, which may have helped. Now, listen, if you want to get elected as an independent, here's the closest thing I can offer as a guide to what you need to do. Number one, the single biggest advantage you can have from the day of your campaign kickoff is name recognition. You can win without it, but I'll tell you, it must make it so much harder out there, and it does. I wouldn't have won in 2019 if I was running as Jacqui Smith. I had a book, I had TV appearances, and I had over 300,000 people following me on Facebook. I'd been a senator already for 4.5 years before that. And if you don't have those sort of advantages, you're going to have to work, you're going to have your work cut out for you. I can tell you that right now. You are really starting behind the 8 ball. Most people who want to run as independents don't have name recognition. So if you're one of them, what can you do to make up the gap? Because you are going to need it. Number 2, volunteers. You will not win this alone. No independent's been elected without volunteers. You need them to help you with just about everything. And you're running against someone who's got volunteers and they're all over the top of you. My rule of thumb is on election day, for every political booth in your electorate you want to be covered, you want at least 7 volunteers. Elections aren't won on election day though, so don't worry if you don't reach that number. And volunteers don't have to be political animals either. Ask everyone, friends, family, if you're part of the community group, ask them if they'll help out in those last few hours of the campaign. Last election, my most reliable volunteer was my dad. And people who like you, they'll want to help you as well. So let them know what they can do and don't be shy about asking them. Third is money. And money isn't everything, but I tell you what, it helps. It's going to be a factor, and it is a factor. Even if you don't make it a factor, it will still be a factor. So get comfortable asking for donations. If you're not comfortable asking for money, people won't be comfortable giving to you either. So the other thing is just try not to treat people like an ATM. One shot should do it. So unless people, for us, we take monthly donations, fortnightly donations of $5 and $10 notes just from the general public out there. Number 4, a story. Imagine you've just cast your ballot for Bob Katter and friends ask who you voted for. Before you answer, what do you think your friend would think about it? If you told them you voted for Bob Katter, what would it tell them about you? Now flip it. Imagine you're Bob Katter. Is everybody okay with that? Just put your big hat on. I'm sure he's going to love it. You need an answer to that question of what it says about a voter to vote for you, because if it doesn't say anything, nobody's going to vote for you. If voting is an act of expression, you've got to be a way for voters. You've got to be a way for voters to express something. 5, you're going to need an election narrative. Your potential voters can rally behind. That gives voters permission to vote differently to how they used to before and in the past. You don't need to oppose everything your opponent stands for to be a good alternative to your opponent. And you don't have to hate water just because your opponent drinks it. Find 1 or 2 issues you disagree with and focus there. Tie in a narrative to explain why those issues should matter to voters and explain why you're the person to change them. A villain your voters can unite against. So we've all seen Zaylee Steggall had Tony Abbott, and Cathy McGowan had Sophie Mirabella, and Karen Phillips had the Liberal Party that kicked out the local member and their Prime Minister. And her campaign narrative was to send them a message. She had to give Liberal voters permission to vote for her and not risk anything. In policies, as an independent, policies don't matter as much as what you might think. I'll be honest with you. Every independent says that they want an ICAC. So do the Greens. Every independent says they want truth in advertising laws for politicians and donation reforms. And so do the Greens. Why do people vote for independents over the Greens? Why did Karen Phillips beat the Greens candidate in 2018 Wentworth by-election? And what policy did she put to them that the Greens didn't also put to them? Voting is about identity. Who we are is how we vote. I was speaking to the woman who cleans my office and told her we were coming into a sitting week, and she asked me what a sitting week was. Most normal Australians just aren't interested in politics, to be honest with you. Who do you think she votes for? What policy would someone from another party have to adopt to get her to change her vote? And finally, you need ready to return serve. Independents work better when they're running a positive campaign. You're seeking to draw a contrast with the incumbent. But the more you get attention, the more scared that they get, and the more scared they get, the more negative they'll go up against you. The incumbent will attack you if they think you're a threat. So if they're attacking you, you must be doing a bloody good job. You've already got your foot in the door. Have an answer to the question of what you can possibly achieve as an independent as opposed to a member of the government. They'll argue you're unreliable, you're unable to deliver, You're able to be ignored, and they'll argue that independents create instabilities. Or I think, as one former Prime Minister may have said about 4 or 5 years ago, it was like herding cats. So make every attack a liability to them and make fun of them. Don't try not to take it too seriously, because I can tell you, if you don't find some fun in it while you're out campaigning or in politics, it will drive you around the bend. It really seriously will take hold of you. A person could still do all these things and still lose, but they're less likely to. I didn't make this stuff up. It's based on what's worked before. Winning the first time as an independent, you need everything to go right for you, and it's a game with percentages. It can do something to help your chances by 1 or 2%, then do it. If you can just find that extra few percent and it's going to work for you, then go out there and sell it. Then find about 50 more things like that and do those too. Then, for Christ's sake, cross your fingers with everything you've got, pray to God, and hope the heavens are shining on you, because honestly, as an independent and very little money and out there, and if that means standing at traffic lights with call flutes and waving at people, if that means for me, I had the opportunities during that 20 months after I got done for dual citizenship to go on TV. Whether that meant I had to go to South Africa and eat some crap just so I could hit people because I had no advertising money. If that meant that I had to go back to where we come from and get shot at overseas, so be it. But you have to get out there and give it everything you've got, and you better find a difference, because people will be drawn to you if you are different than most of them out there, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for hope and they're looking for faith, because they've lost that in our politicians. So look, and the only, you can't lose anything from running either, even if you don't win. My God, the people that you meet out there and how much you grow in a really, really short period of time is absolutely amazing. So anyway, thank you very much for having me on. I look forward to the questions.
So, Jacqui, a clap to you. And I'm glad you decided your own script. We've got some funny noises happening here. So one of the things that we appreciate so much about you and we can expect from you is down-to-earth, good, sensible advice. So that was pretty unique to share all of that with us. And you're known for your tenacity, and we can feel that in you. And we know that everybody needs to have some of that to be able to achieve what you have. So thank you for that. So stick with us, because we're going to now listen to our last panel member for this afternoon, and that's the wonderful Tammy Atkins, who is a former founding member of Voices for Indi and a managing director of a business called It's on Purpose. So Tammy, are you there, and can Max unmute you?
I'm ready to go, Alana.
Good on you, Tammy.
Well, hi everyone, and Jacqui, and Judy, thanks for your wise words. I've got the really tough job of following you, so we'll see how I go. As we all know, because we're all here, the only way we're going to fix Australian politics is to get involved and to stop being a spectator and to do something. And in 2012, I gave it a go. I ran and I was elected to Wangaratta Council, and it was an interesting ride, and that itself is worthy of a completely separate presentation. A year later, in 2013, my personal interests in social change and community politics collided and led me to, as Alana said, connect with like-minded people and contribute to the creation of Voices for Indi and help shape community politics and the revolution that's underway and that we're now all part of this weekend. And then in 2018, I gave it a go for my state seat. And I can tell you that, and this follows a fair bit of what Jacqui's just said, but running a campaign and losing hurts. It completely sucks. But it's one of the best things I've done, and it's one of the richest experiences that I've had. And I took a big chunk off the margin of my state seat. It went from 19.2% to 12.6%, the margin. And at the end of the day in preferences, I came third by 39 votes. So 40 more votes, and I would have had some preferences distributed by the ALP. It would have been a bit of a fun day, who knows. But it's one thing to support a campaign, and I've been part of a few over the years, and for me, it's an entirely different experience to be the candidate. And I want to share a few of my learnings from the hustings, because I've been asked to, but also because I hope that one day you'll all either run for a seat or be the force behind someone who does. And I'll start by saying that firstly, you just can't compromise your integrity. your principles and your values matter. And I'm going to be honest and say it's unlikely that you'll win, at least on your first go. And don't get me wrong, my absolute goal was to win, and I'm forever grateful to everyone who helped me. But my backup plan was to keep being me. And on the campaign trail, you're constantly challenged to compromise your integrity. And it's the team behind you that helps you stay the course. So having the right campaign manager is really crucial. And for that, I caught my business partner at a really weak moment. I think she was actually on holidays when I rang, and it didn't take a lot of encouragement, but she was able to swoop in and be my campaign manager. And that worked because we'd been working together for years, so she could speak frankly to me. She always had my back, and she knew me well enough to make operational decisions for me. And I'm happy to say that despite what I put her through 3 years ago, we still have a thriving business together. But having the right campaign manager really is crucial. Unfortunately, we know that there's a really low bar set in our party politics. And what we all here want, the integrity and the accountability that we're striving for, isn't common. And geez, the incumbent I challenged had even been charged with fraud. And I went in knowing it wouldn't be a fair fight. Obviously, I lacked the resources of incumbency. I didn't have a party brand, but I was I guess, tough and resilient enough to be prepared for them to throw mud at me from the gutter. And so bring it on. And I managed to mine their nastiness for opportunity. I thought I'd share a couple of examples today with you. The first one, the day before the election, when the National Party purchased a full-page ad sledging me. That meant that I could call them out for their lies, and I got to do the whole day doing TV interviews. And I could never have afforded that much TV time on election eve without the National Party's help. During the campaign, there was another moment when another candidate who in the public arena was clearly not a fan of mine drove past my campaign office and saw that I was doing a TV interview, and he thought he might just take it over and make it his. The office was bursting with volunteers and the cameras were there, and he waltzed on in and tried to do a preference deal in front of everyone. It was extraordinary. And so that gave me a little bit more coverage again later that night, a bit of footage of me with my arms crossed and my head shaking and trying really hard not to roll my eyes. I also had the joy of the time the local Liberal Party branch secretary put out a newsletter about me on Liberal Party letterhead, lots of dot points and referring to me as evil. And the Libs didn't even have a candidate in the election. They were doing that on behalf of the Nats. And I've got to say that in terms of finding opportunity in that, the biggest problem with that letter was the outrage it created again. And that meant that it was standing room only in the campaign office on what was already a busy day. As word spread and people said, we can't stand for that. That's not good enough. And it just created more conversation. So I called them out, made some media out of it. And as nasty as what they wrote was, their tactics spoke more about their character than it did mine in reality. And I think the electorate saw that. But as a lot of what Senator Lambie said, at the end of the day, people vote by name recognition. They don't often remember the story, but they'll remember your name. And I didn't have enough brand. I didn't have enough name out there, but I did my best to make the most of the opportunities that my opponents created for me along the way. I think it's really important to, before you even announce your standing, to know what you're standing for and what you can do, so that when people ask, hey, why should I support you? You can be really confident in your answer. And I don't know, has anyone tried to brag about themselves? It's really tough. It's uncomfortable. And if you want to run, you have to get really good at, you have to be really good at bragging. But you've got to brag within means, because if you're not elected and you go back to your day job, like I did, you need to have not damaged your brand in your workplace, but have instead elevated it. So constantly being true to yourself takes the real risk out of running and makes it more like an expensive diversion. So instead of saving up for your next holiday, save up for your next campaign, give it that go. I could tell you anytime about my campaign budget, my plan, how I fundraised, how I use social media, but every electorate's really diverse and every candidate is different. But I did want to tell you that, to finish, we independents often refer to ourselves as the underdog. Still, my most memorable learning from the hustings was that if every second member of your team has a cute dog and they're out and about with you, you'll get a great response, because most people don't care for politics, but they'll stop and they'll talk to you so that they can pat the dog. So create opportunities that way. But pulling it all together, the 5 points are: if you don't compromise your integrity, no matter what the outcome, you'll be fine. Have the right campaign manager, find opportunities in the nastiness, be clear on why people should vote for you, and invite dogs and puppies onto the campaign. But to finish, challenging the status quo is really hard, but that's not a reason not to do it. So I think you should all give it a go. Thank you.
Tammy, that was fabulous. Thank you. The overwhelming message coming through is respect for you, Tammy, because you led the way in so many ways and inspired so many people. And we're just all waiting to see if and when the next time comes. So given that the topic for this panel is lessons from the hustings, we're not going to get into sort of politics or policies. We're really wanting your personal learnings about how you get out there and how you make this happen and how you survive. So I'm going to turn to Jacqui Hawkins with the first question. Jacqui, I'm interested in this notion of winning and people talking about there's more than one way to win and there's more than one win. What were the winnings for you in being such a young 27 or 8-year-old candidate, having done the enormous amount of work that you did to put into your campaign? Tell us about what you've learned as a young person and how it set you up.
So I guess with running for the seat of Benambra in Victoria, for me, the winning was closing down the margin and trying to really challenge that complacency and hold them to account, because it just hadn't been done. And I guess the learnings along that, and one of the most valuable experiences that come through that, is the team that I built around me. And I've seen in the group chat here, my offsiders passed along to me, someone's asked about, how do you find those people with those common values? Well, start with the people who are already around you, your family, your friends. They're the people who already back you and support you every day, no matter what you do. And they know 3 other people that, once they get involved and they say at a barbecue or wherever they may be, what have you been up to? What have you been doing? They can also share your story and they can be your advocates and motivators for other people to join the campaign. But like I mentioned earlier, it is also a challenge to bring those people in. And looking back in my campaign, I wish I started that community work much sooner. I kind of announced 6 months before the actual state election, just to get prepared, go out into the community. But I hadn't done that community work in terms of really identifying the movers and shakers geographically who would, speak to their community, the manager of the football club, the pub owner, whoever it may be. You need to get them on side and identify them soon so you can, actually get votes and have someone out there who's speaking about you. I know on the campaign trail in Hustings, we went to a couple of country towns and 2 or 3 people turned up, which is great. But there were some times where people didn't turn up. So we had to, go and introduce ourselves and make something of that evening. But if the work had been done previously and we'd identified some real community champions, it could have been a different outcome. But in saying that, we shaved off a significant margin. Where, the current member used to get 60% of the vote, and now it was only 1,000 votes between me and him. So I think that was one of the significant learnings for me, was that I did a lot of the theory. I should have started the practice a bit earlier.
Yes, well, you've got lots of time ahead of you and you've inspired lots of people. I think you're going to have your own yellow army next time, given that you might adopt the same colour, or perhaps it'll be orange next time. Tell us, we have a question that's come through the chat line, and I'm going to ask each person this. What did you do out there in your campaign on the hustings that you would never do again? Or is there anything?
I'll start.
Good on you, Judy.
I've often thought about that, but to be honest, I think if I'd thought about it, I probably wouldn't have done it, because it just happened, and I could never have identified my tipping point, then kick-started everything. the fact that the council elections 3 months after that was just serendipity, perhaps. I don't know, because otherwise I would have had to have gone down the role of a pretty long-winded market research, because it's quite different to a country area where you don't have kids at school with each other and people go to work in other places and shop elsewhere. So I just think I was so lucky that I had an opportunity right in front of me that I could use. And I remember thinking about the people said you can't run on a single issue. And I remember thinking, you know, waking up the next morning after the election and not needing Anthony Green from the ABC to work out, you know, did people support what I wanted? The answer was yes, they did. There was no obfuscation there. It was just very clear. And so, look, I think not, but I think I was lucky in my timing, which was purely, you know, beyond control, really.
Yeah. Hey, Jacqui, Lambie, interested, Tammy talked about working with dogs. They say never work with dogs or children. Can you think of things that have happened in your campaign that you think, oh my God, I wish that hadn't happened?
Yes, well, I've run through 3 very different ones. I had the middle one with the double D, and then I got done on section 44. So I've run them all very differently. And obviously the first time I ran, I had been out there for about 18 months before Clive Palmer come in on the end, because I just had no money left, nothing. So for me, I wouldn't be doing robocalls, I wouldn't be doing CDs or DVDs in over there in your post box. Just absolutely saturated the media down here in Tasmania. All you could see was yellow and black, and I just, for me, I don't need to do that. I can find my way around it doing other things. You know, people around Tasmania, they'd rather you be out there waving to them from traffic lights. They'd rather see you walking around every show because you've got no money to put your own show stand up. So you're running around in a jacket just with Jacqui Lambie. It's very, very basic stuff. Your whole, you know, I didn't have a car when I left, and I really didn't want to go and spend 8 or 9 grand on a car because I just didn't have much money when I did leave, and I was still paying house payments. And one of my dearest friends lent me his big white van and put Jacqui Lambie all over it. That's how I survived the last election, you know, with me and Dad just running around in a goddamn van, doing that, just getting out everywhere. We just keep going round and round and round and round Tasmania until we're dizzy. So, you know, you don't need all these splashings. You can do it other ways. Pre-postals are another one, just so you notice. And when people go and do their pre-posting, because I knew I didn't have enough money to run radio ads, and certainly had no ads in the papers, but I had radio ads, I think, from the 45 grand I made from going out in the jungle. Most of that went, but I ran that anticipating when the election was. So I ran that 8 weeks before he called the election, running into his call. And my day that I finished doing that, the next day he called the election. So, you know, so that would cost me triple the amount. So I was doing all that basic stuff. So getting before the pre-postal votes, well, get out there, especially to the elderly, they like to see you, that sort of thing. So there is other ways of doing it, but you're going to work your ass off. And there's no other way to put it. You know, I didn't have an office, I didn't have a team. And I had a young fella come in the last 3 months with his camera and everything and really boost up my social media rather than leaving it to me. So there would have been 3 of us, and I had probably a dozen mates around me doing bits and pieces. And for me, because I'm so well known down here, I just put on my Facebook, you know, I had to put my own number out there. People had to ring me so I could get my call flutes. I spent about, I think in the end, I had 1,800 call flutes running around Tasmania all over the place, and bigger signs that I'd made from the cardboard and putting on people's fences. That's how we.
So that's really interesting, Jacqui. In our last panel session, we had a discussion about fundraising and money, and learned everything from, you know, $80,000 for a campaign to, you know, Josh Frydenberg, we were told, spent over $2 million. So you're telling us your story, and I think it's a really good example of everybody's got to find a way to make it work. And you were prepared to put in the hard yards and be out there. Rebecca Sharkey told the same story. Knocking on people's doors was the most effective thing that she did. So
yeah, I can't knock on doors, unfortunately, because what happens to me is everybody knows me here. So this is my downfall. It's easy for me to walk around shopping centres. So we've got a lot of elderly. So I end up having a lot of tea cake and a lot of cups of tea, and I'll be lucky if I can get through 8 or 9 people in a day. So that's my problem here. So it's much easier for me. Yeah, too much tea cake, trust me. We're doing so for me by the end of a campaign.
You don't need any dogs to stop people in the street. I'm going to come back to Jacqui Hawkins, and then I'll come to Tammy. So Jacqui, what have you got to add? What happened in your campaign?
Well, I guess I mentioned it kind of before, was identifying those community champions. I wish I had done that work. Like I said, I announced 6 months out before the election, and going forward, I probably won't do that again, because I was on the hustings for 6 months, and that is quite a long burn. And it does have a lot of wear on your team around you. And I was very fortunate to have Jill Briggs, who, took 2 months off paid work just to come volunteer her time. So I was very fortunate to have someone who was doing all that back work for me. But going forward, timing, it's really critical. You got to think about when you're ready and have an action plan, because there's nothing worse than when you launch and put your name up and put your hand up and it kind of just falls a little bit flat. And I struggled locally to engage the media. I didn't play in that space. So I'm also going to think, if going forward, if I put my hand up again, I really need to work there, because at the end of the day, people are reading the paper and they're taking it for fact, whether it's right or wrong. And it's a space that I didn't really play in. Like I said, I was dabbling in social media, and that only works to a certain cohort. So I need to make sure that I'm playing in both sandpits and that everyone can hear and also see my message and what I actually stand for.
Yep.
And I guess the other thing that Jacqui Lambie spoke about with my campaign is I had strong name recognition. So as a 5th generation local, a lot of people knew me or my dad or grandfather, so had a really strong name behind us. But also Kathy McGowan came out publicly and said she'd be voting one Jacqui Hawkins this state election. And that also, played a significant sway on the vote and confidence of this McGowan country that I live in. And though I ran on the smell of an oily rag, $11,500 campaign, we put a huge dent in what was, 60% straight up first preference votes for a Liberal Conservative seat.
Yeah, that is inspirational. Tammy, I'm going to come back to you and your dog comment. So we know from Kathy McGowan, the sheep breeder, that the secret weapon in her campaign was sheep wearing orange T-shirts. So dogs and sheep are figuring big. Tammy, tell us about your campaign. Is there anything in hindsight that you would have done differently?
Well, you don't know what you don't know. So there's a lot more that I could, should I run again, there's a lot more I could do better. But one of the key things that I did fall down on was postal votes and absentees. And the system is just really difficult for an independent. And maybe I'll chase up Susanna Sheed for a chat about this. But I only got 13% of postal votes. My opponent got 45%. So he got 600 votes through the postal vote system. And the way it works, you've just got no hope unless you've got a team of people. The Victorian Electoral Commission sends you the list that day. You've got 24 hours to get 100 letters out. You wait for the next day, you've got 24 hours to get 100 letters out. And so I fell down on the processes. I didn't have enough volunteers. I didn't have enough money in the postal vote space of my campaign. So that really was a crucial error. And picking up on something that Jacqui Hawkins has said, I don't think I'll spend as much time next time courting my local newsprint media. It's from a return on investment, it's just not worth it. They don't print what you're saying. You don't get a fair go at all. So I think the focus will be on social media and online media. Maybe things will change before the next election, but I can't see that happening.
Yep. So I have a really interesting question for all of you to focus on, given that we know, the voters of the future are out there, they're still at school, they're at university, young people and their involvement in participatory democracy is our future, hopefully. So tell us about how you've worked with young people. What's the most supportive and useful thing that young people can do to support you or did do to support you? And how did you garner the support of young people? And did you purposely aim to do that? So Jacqui Lambie, I might go to you. How do young people figure in your life and in your campaign?
I think because it was a pretty low-key campaign. It was all about boots on the ground between Dad and I. And like I said, somebody in the last 3 months and just some dozen friends on the outside doing other bits and pieces. I've got a lot of social media. You know, like I said, I've got obviously Facebook's grown now. I think there's about 350,000 on that. I have yeah, Instagrams are about 30 or 35, and then you know, you also have I have no. So you know, you have all that. You do that. So the only thing I don't have is TikTok. So we're also running into that now. The other big thing coming out also is doing podcasts. No one's catching on to this. If someone asks you on a podcast, get on there, because the more people that can hear your voice and hear your own personal story, the more people will start looking at you. So for me, it hasn't really been, we haven't really tackled the young people, but I mean, the good thing is for me, because I had two choices here, you know, it's either be the Bachelorette, I guess, or go out into the jungle. So I've got it all down pat. So I'm sort of still missing that 14 to 20-year-olds, but I have got the next lot coming through, and I'm up in about 5 years' time. So we're good to go. So everybody knows Jacqui from the jungle. We're good, you know, but I haven't quite got, you know, I just can't bring myself to say, hey, put me on Batchy. I think it'd knock me out. I'm just not sure where I'm going to find that time.
Fantastic. So, Judy, we can only presume that you were campaigning on an issue that was so relevant to young people. Tell us about young people and their support for your campaign down in Richmond.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Secondary school students absolutely love this. In fact, it's part of the Year 12 legal studies course now, curriculum. The injecting room campaign and the changing legislation, the impact of private members' bills. You know, and my friends in that sector just tell me at the end of every semester how extraordinarily engaged their students are in this issue, because it's about, you know, health issues, mental health issues. I speak to a lot of universities, a lot of schools. Kids come up to me afterwards and say, my brother, my mother, my next door neighbour, my auntie, you know, it's such a widespread affliction in our community. And so one of the things that I found was very helpful for our campaign, I did a lot of interviews with students doing their masters and various bits and pieces in journalism. They got articles in the paper, mainstream media and online. A lot of them did socials for us. You know, it was actually, it's something that really resonated with that group. And in fact, we had a lot of street art that was done by people who donated, you know, hours of their time and effort. So we were very fortunate that people really did, they really identified with that topic.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's time to bring this session to a close. And while we've spoken about fundraising and money and what it takes to run a campaign, I really think that we can all agree that this session has been gold. What you shared with us, we could make a little booklet that hand out of all the wonderful ideas and thoughts that you have put forward. So thank you so much, each of you, for the thought you've put into this and for being so generous to share your experience of out there on the hustings. And I suppose I can only finish my thanks to the panel by saying what Cathy McGowan always says, if not you, who? And if not now, when? Well, I congratulate you all for being the people who stood up and asked that question of yourselves and the contribution you've made. Thank you.
Okay.